The biggest goal was to finally put on a good showing for imports. Win or lose, I just wanted to show that these cars built right can be competitive, they can be consistent, and they can be fast. They knew my car was fast. Was it the fastest there? Probably not. It was quick, it was competitive. You know, we go round after round, we win 5 rounds, we win. $16,000 is pretty awesome. It's most money I've won with that car.
Ain't nobody else out here laughing because you beat me. Yeah. Or because I got beat by a Honda. That don't happen out here.
Hey, I'm Aaron Lopez, and this is my story. So growing up, I guess my parents slowly realized that maybe I had a mechanical mind. My parents would always tell me, I can't remember, my parents always tell me that I would take everything apart. I think no remote was safe inside the house. I guess that's the way my mind worked. I wanted to see how things worked. And so if I saw an opportunity for it to come apart in pieces, it was apart. About 10 years old, we had a family friend that had an automotive shop. It's close to us, and my father went over there and asked, hey, my son may be a little mechanically inclined and wanted to see if he could just kind of come hang out and learn, shadow, maybe clean a little bit. I want to say it was summertime. I know I was 10 years old, went over there. I might have cleaned for about 2 hours and then realized that that's not what I wanted to do. Shortly thereafter, we kind of knew I was going to be like a permanent fixture there. I even got my own uniforms. The GK service uniform truck would come. I'd have my own little uniforms. So as a kid, it was pretty cool. I had my name on there, and I don't know, I felt kind of special. A couple of years there, just kind of learned from him, and that's where the very first time I went to the racetrack was with him. And funny enough, yes, I do race imports and work on imports, but the very first time I went out to the drag strip, I was 12 years old, and it was actually with the 1970 Chevy Nova. It was green, still remember the color, and I guess one of the biggest memories I have there is one of the first engines I was part of building. And he gave me a real simple task, was just to lap the valves. He gave me a valve lapping tool, a little wooden handle one, some valve lapping compound, showed me how to do it. I sat there for, I don't know, hours probably, just real simple, just moving my hands back together. Even the sound kind of reminds me of that. Just lap valves. I don't think anybody could mess it up. We put the rest of the engine together. He built the engine and put the rest of the engine together and went out to the racetrack, and the car ran like mid-13s. And this was probably in '96. And just super excited. I helped build that engine. I had racing go-karts, I had dirt bikes, I had mini bikes, I had anything that had a motor on it, I had. It wasn't until I went to the drag strip to like, oh man, like that's it. Like that's what I want to do. Like I said, race imports currently, but I was back into imports growing up, and like the real import, the original import was Volkswagens. And then actually got my first import was a Volkswagen Beetle. It's a 1970 Volkswagen Beetle. I actually still have that Volkswagen today. A buddy of mine drove a Honda Accord at the same time. And then I hate to say it, but the Fast and Furious movie kind of put a little influence on everybody. Of course, the Volkswagens are pretty slow. It was cool to drive. I liked it, but I kind of had the itch to go faster. It was easier to I guess buy a Honda. I mean, he had a Honda. I was like, well, I want to buy a Honda. So I bought a Honda Civic. Had it painted, kind of restored it. I put a B16 swap in it, put some wheels and tires on it, lowered it. I had a hand pinstripe done on it, a little Honda emblem on the fender. It was a really nice car. Took it out to the drag strip. I'll never forget the first time slip that I got. It went 1656. I thought it was a rocket ship until I grabbed the time slip and I was like, oh wow, this is really slow. Shortly thereafter, I got into a car accident with that car. I was on the way to high school, coming over a hill on a kind of like an up road that goes up and down. A Ford Ranger was in my lane, and it was either a head-on collision or swerve. And so I kind of 2-lane road, kind of swerved over to the right, got into the gravel. Car kind of came around, and of course, what's always in the way? Telephone pole. So the car went sideways into a telephone pole. I had just spent all summer building the car, totaled the car. The car was totaled, so they were gonna take it to the junkyard. So I pulled the B16 swap out of it, and that was it for the B series. I kind of realized that it was a whole lot slower than I thought it was. It had no torque, it was gutless. It would rev to the moon, had all kinds of RPM, but I didn't care for it. Like I said, my friend had a Honda Accord, and I kind of liked it. I was like, oh man, that car had a whole lot more torque than the B series. And so that was it. That's where I got started into the H series. I bought a 2-door Honda Accord. It was a 92 Honda Accord EX, 2000 or 2001. Went H series and have never looked back. So it's 24 years with an H series. Never really owned any other motor. I've worked on other stuff, but as for me, that's where I started with that.
That was your senior scrapbook?
This is my senior scrapbook.
How did it get like that?
They don't make them like this. So I made it. So yeah, this is 2002. There happens to be a little car there. My car has to make the cut in the senior scrapbook. So this is back. Yeah, a little throwback right here. Look at that. This was my car that I built after I had my Honda Civic. So this is after I realized that I had one B series, and then this is when I went to H22. This was the first time I had my H series.
I like how you put the whole swap.
The whole swap cost around $3,500. Yeah.
So
well, I'm sorry. Look, 2001, but look, January 2022 is when I got it. So I ordered it in 01.
Super clean. So about $3,500 back in 2001.
2001, 2002. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was super clean. So just popping the hood. If I didn't have that air filter on there, it looked like all stock. Like
sure,
it looked like that motor belonged in there, which it probably should have. Same thing with the car. Like I said, original wheels. I had like a 1.2-inch Eibach Pro Kit, like lowering springs. It wasn't a ton. It wasn't slammed on the ground. I know I talked about driving a Volkswagen in high school. Haven't found too many pictures yet, but it did make the cut over here. I have it under my job. Remember I said I started working as a mechanic when I was really young, but so this was actually my card. I say my card. This is where I worked, personalized automotive service. Here I am, Aaron Lopez. That was the address of the shop. AAC certified master technician. David Rich, the gentleman, taught me everything. He was an AAC certified master tech. He was actually a Cadillac specialist. That's like what was his bread and butter. What I didn't say is that back, I want to say I was maybe I went to go take the AAC certification test, I think at 14 years old, and I almost passed to be a master tech, and I didn't. I felt some stuff, but I did get my automotive refrigerant. So of course in high school, as you can see here, I'm also certified in automotive air conditioning and licensed to buy Freon. This is me, my little refrigerant license. So back then, R12, not anybody could just buy R12, so I could go to the parts store as a kid and buy R12, and they would always trip out because I was a little kid and I was like, oh, I got my license here, and buy some Freon. So yeah, that's
pretty cool, man.
Yeah, that's right here. It says this picture basically tells it all. I'm a mechanic by trade. Spend most of my time working on cars. So there it is. I mean, this is.
And how much has changed since then?
Yeah, it hasn't. I still work on cars. It hasn't. As with anything, you want to go faster. So I built another Accord. I was like, well, that's easiest. Let me just get another Accord. Let me gut it. Got another motor, built one, and that was like the first time me building an engine. It went 1250s on like a 50 shot of nitrous, 50 or 75 shot. And I was like, okay, that's cool. And then I wanted to go turbo. I bought a turbo kit off of Honda Tech, actually. And that's where I learned about the motor swap stuff. Back then, there was no social media. It was all forums. So everything was on Honda Tech. You know, you'd go and you'd type in a search or whatever and look at what everybody else did, and people would post their photos and how-tos and write-ups, and that's where I learned how to do the motor swap stuff. I didn't know how to tune. I just kind of loaded a base map in there and kind of tweaked with it a little bit, and it went 1250s on nitrous, and it went 1147 on 17 pounds of boost. Raced that for a little while, for a year or so, and I was like, man, I want the car to go faster, but what do I need? I need something lighter. As with anything, you need a lighter chassis. So this brings us to like 2004 is when I built what you know as my race car. I can maybe point to it or whatever. So that's it right there. I bought that car at auction. It was wrecked. Took it to a friend's body shop, and he pulled the frame. The strut tower was pushed over like into the brake booster, into the master cylinder. Straightened that out for me, and then brought it back to my dad's shop at the time and started working on it. So that's 2004. Did a motor swap on it. Pulled the motor out of the Prelude, out of the Accord, and put it in the Civic. And then at that time, I realized that I probably wasn't the best tuner. I went to a local shop here in town, and he had recommended a tuner, but the tuner was in Houston. And he's like, hey man, this tuner comes into town. I get like 4 or 5 cars together, and he'll come tune your car. And I was like, okay, cool, no problem. I had no idea who he was. We had grabbed a handful of cars together, and he's like, actually, we're gonna have to go to a dyno in Austin. And it's like, that's no problem. It's like an hour and a half from me. So went to Austin at some shop over there, and that's when I met Jason Herrera, also known as Stupid Fast. So that was 2004. I changed the turbo kit, did a different manifold, and kind of updated some stuff. But went to dyno, had no idea what to expect on horsepower, and car made very first time on dyno, 565 horsepower. At the time, I wanted to run 10-second pass. I had gone 1147 in the Accord, and I was like, oh man, well, you know, we want to run a 10. This is in 2004, and at the time I had just a single disc clutch. I don't even remember what clutch was in there. So I went out, ran like 11.0 a few times, and then realized I needed a twin disc clutch. And so this is 2004. I ended up getting twin disc clutch. That's when I got my first competition clutch. Put a twin disc in there, And I don't quite know how much, I don't think we struggled too much, but I remember my first 10-second pass wasn't at my local track. It was actually in Houston, in Baytown, and it was at an IFO. I don't remember the mile an hour. I went 1081 at like 138 or something like that. So completely skipped the 1090s, went straight into a 1080, and that was front wheel drive. So that was 2004, 2005. Started running IFO, started running the series and started racing that. And then shortly thereafter, Cliff Wallace, owner of IFO, started a points series. Maybe in like 2008, and so it kind of gave you reason to travel more. You know, the more races you would go to and get some points at every race, every round you would win, you'd get 10 points. So that kind of gave me the motivation to, hey, let's start traveling, like not just in intrastate, let's go out of state. So then I would go to Louisiana, Oklahoma, those are the closest runs. But went out to Vegas to get some points, and then a buddy of mine, Darren Thomas, he raced FIP, he had an all-wheel drive Eagle Talon. He was making a bunch of races, and so that would kind of make me travel more because we were like neck and neck. I think we were almost tied. This was 2008, and we were pretty tied on points, and it was like he who would travel the furthest. And so I did like a kamikaze trip to Montgomery, Alabama, just unannounced, just to get some points. Ended up winning the national championship in 2008. I lost 2009 to Darren Thomas. He beat me like one round. I think it was 10 points. You know, did a lot of racing at IFO. A lot of people freak out if you've seen it. There's a whole bunch of like IFO winner stickers down the windshield of the race car. And like, oh my gosh, you won so many races. And like, I would always joke, it's like, well, yeah, you show up to enough races, you're bound to win one. I did very well. The car was consistent. It wasn't always the fastest. All the imports back then, it's like, oh, that car's not gonna leave the line. It's gonna break an axle. It was a stereotype. Like all the imports broke axles back then. And so I went through my share of broken axles, and then that's when I went and got DSS axles, drive shaft shop. And man, I never broke an axle since then. It's been decades since I broke an axle, which was awesome. So, you know, hands down, you know, drive shaft shop, best axles out there. They've been with me since day one. The next week's link was the transmission. The car was making like 800 horsepower somewhere in there. I would get 5 to 7 passes out of a transmission, and I would kind of know when it would break. It would start whining, and so, you know, I'd get a handful of passes, and then you lose second gear. So then I said, forget that. I would change a whole stack, and that's how I could go rounds. Is that the car would have a fresh transmission gear set in it almost every race. And so I got tired of it. I think I lost count, but I want to say it was 16 or 17 transmissions, OEM trannies that I had in there that I would, you know, break a gear or whatever, or pull the stack out, change, put a fresh stack in there, and that's a lot, 17 transmissions. And that was over the course of a few years. Got tired of changing them. And so then that's when a company came around, and PPG was our only option back then. And it was a gentleman, it was Bullhead Gears. His name was Eric, and he said there was this Honda Tech Days, and he was like, hey, put a group of guys together, and a minimum order was 5 transmissions. And he goes, we need to make an order of 5, and PPG will make us a gear set. And we got 5 guys together, and we did like a little group buy. That's the way it was back on the forums. I was actually the one who boxed up a transmission, and I shipped it to Australia to PPG. And that's when they used that, reverse engineered it, and made the first H-Series H22 dog box. And it went a few months, and next thing you know, I got a box in from Australia, and I had my first PPG dog box. I had a dog box. They made 5, initial run was 5 of them. Man, I put that in there, and the car ran. I mean, it would go round after round after round. I mean, I would travel, we'd have fun. Didn't have to worry about the transmission breaking, didn't have to worry about the axles breaking, just living life racing. I mean, that was the life. I was, I don't know, early 20s. My dad was a car dealer, and so we had a shop at his place. We'd buy and sell cars. I would fix them, I would paint them. I learned how to paint, you know, mechanics since I was 10 years old. So I would do that, and then, you know, give me time to work on my race car and then go racing. And so I did that for quite some time, and just really got hooked. We did that for you know, my mid-20s, and had a blast. But you know, things weren't going anywhere. I was racing and getting older, and I'm like, oh man, like I've never had a real job in my life. Like I've never worked for anybody. My father was self-employed. I was pretty much self-employed. I went to college. I wanted to be a mechanical engineer. I thought I was going to be working on things, and then about 2.5 years in, I realized, maybe I should have done some research, but I realized that a mechanical engineer was more of a desk job, and I am not a desk job person. So that was not gonna work out for me. So I changed my degree, and I went to a really desk job degree. I got a bachelor in business administration, general business. That's the most desk job degree you can get, but I just needed to get a piece of paper. And for my parents, thank them very much. went through, finished college. My brother, I'll bring my brother up. He'd always been in the fire department. He eats, sleeps, breathes it. It was kind of always like in the back of my mind. And I think my parents kind of pushed me a little bit, and they're like, hey, why don't you be a firefighter? And I was like, yeah, whatever, sure. Like, the schedule's great. So every year after I graduated, I would take the fire department test. And it's only once a year here in San Antonio where I live. I passed it the first year. I never failed it, but you just had to score really well. I think like third year in, I scored high enough. I didn't really get into shape well enough, so I passed the I failed the physical agility test. And I was like, oh man, I failed it. I wasn't really too bummed out. It is what it was. I was racing at the time. I loved what I was doing. You know, my parents probably don't know this, but I didn't really try too hard because I loved what I was doing. I was like, yeah, I took the test. I knew I'd buy myself an extra year. If I didn't do well enough, oh well, I'll take the test next year. And so I did that for quite some time. Did that for like 6 years. So I take the test, didn't do good enough. What next year. So finally, I think I was about 20, getting like 28. I was like, oh man, I'm getting pretty close to 30, never had a real job. I had to take the fire department entrance exam, was in November, and happened to be the same weekend that World Cup Finals was. And so I was super bummed out that I couldn't go to World Cup Finals. I had to take the entrance exam, and I'm a firm believer in everything happens for a reason, because that was the year that I really buckled down and I took the test. I passed the test. So I passed the test. I got my letter that's like I passed. So now I was like, man, I got to get into shape. So that was November of 2012. The process was super long. So it was 14 months from the time I took the entrance exam to when I started the fire academy. That's a long time to be in limbo. Every couple of months you get an email, hey, you're into the next process. It's like, okay, cool. It was so stressful because at any time you could get dropped from the process. So like your life was in limbo. During that time, I actually went to World Cup Finals in 2013 and was a spectator. Went to World Cup Finals in 2013 and it's 2024. So I've been going 10 years, this past year was 10 years going to the race. And so went 2013, spectated. I started the Fire Academy January of 2014. Fire Academy was 6 months long. Got out in June, July-ish, somewhere in there, and then we had to plan our vacation. And guess what? The first vacation that I planned was I planned to have off that first week of November, end of October, first week of November to go where? To go to World Cup Finals. And took my race car that time, was 2014. Very first time I went to World Cup Finals and haven't stopped yet. You know, I was racing other races, still ran IFOs and stuff like that, but that was the race at the end of the year. The conditions were there, the weather's amazing, the track prep's there. It was the best of the best, the fastest cars in the country, in the world, that's why it's called World Cup Finals, would travel to this race. I have yet to win the race. That's a goal of mine. Went several years, didn't even qualify. There's a cool little sticker that you get if you qualify, and I went for years without even qualifying. The very first time I qualified, that's awesome because it knows like you're part of the, you know, the best of the best or the fastest cars in the country or in the world, which was super cool. So the Few H22 crew, that was kind of an accident. My father, I think I said back before, was a car dealer. We had my dad had a car dealership called Mainland Motors. We did like a little thing called Mainland Motorsports. And then my girlfriend at the time, she was a graphic designer. And for my birthday, I think it was my birthday, surprised me with some team shirts. I had no idea. So in the back of the shirt said Mainland Motorsports. It had my name, Aaron Lopez. It had Sport Front Wheel Drive. That's the class we were running at the time. It had my car number, 6666, still the same car number that I run today. And then on the front, up here on the chest, right here, it said the Few H22 crew, and she came up with that logo, or that slogan, and it kind of worked out because it was really just for our crew, like the few of us. It was, you know, 3 of us, and then just kind of went with it. Ended up dropping the Mainland Motorsports deal, just kind of rebranded into everybody they kind of liked the Few H22 crew, and it kind of worked out twofold because the H series wasn't a really popular engine. Still isn't. I mean, I guess I don't want to say that I've helped kind of keep it alive. Maybe I have. I've never let it go, but there's not that many of us. There's a few of us, of the H series guys. And so the Few H22 crew just kind of went with it and just stayed with it. Now you can buy stuff that's, you know, shelf parts that you don't have to special order stuff. And so that helped keep the H22 alive. The car was front wheel drive for we're at 20 years now, so about 15 years. I had a blast. Like I said, did a bunch of racing. It got to the point where the car was fast, but it was only fast on like prep tracks. So I started taking the car out less, and not that it wasn't any fun, but it's like, man, like you build this car to go fast and you realize the faster you go, the less you race it, the more you work on it. And I'm like, man, it's not as fun. And at this time, the no prep stuff started becoming really popular. And so this was about 5 years ago. I went out, I took the car out to a no prep race, and then we started doing some like top end stuff, meaning you race at the top end of the track. So you no longer race on the track surface, you race in the shutdown area. So there's no prep. So I saw that and I'm like, I think I can make my car all-wheel drive. I've had my transmission apart 30, 40 times. I don't know, I lost count how many times. And I kind of knew what kind of room I had to work in there. Went back to the shop and got a transmission and got a K-series transmission and literally cut some parts together and started looking at things and started welding and started making things happen and clearance and fit and machine. And I didn't tell anybody. I did some close friends. Magic, my buddy Magic knew. Phil, of course, knew. And so I was working on it for quite some time, a few months. When I finally put it together, my buddy Magic was the first one to see it run. And I took it out, took it down the street, drove it. Okay, cool, everything went. And I was like, well, let's video the first launch. I mean, either it's gonna make a really cool video, it's gonna explode, the transmission's gonna fall out of it, or it's gonna go fast. We took it out around some construction area over there and you know, got it up on the launch control, let the clutch out, and the car kind of just spun, didn't spin the rear tires, and it launched, and I was like, okay, cool, it didn't break, and I'm like, all right, it's all-wheel drive, but you know, what we know now, the viscous coupler was shot. It put almost no power to the back, and so it still spun, but it went, and I was like, okay, cool, like the car was all-wheel drive. And so it was kind of a success. We're like, man, it really didn't go anywhere, but whatever, let's go to the track. And so this is with a transmission that I physically, you know, welded and made together, my own deal, and it had a K-series transfer case and everything I did, and it made it work. And so we turned the car down because I didn't know what it was gonna do. I played with the launch a little bit, went to my track, and for our first pass, let the clutch out, the car went like 136, 60 foot. It doesn't sound like a lot, but from a 149 to a 136, man, I let my foot off the clutch and the car like actually put me back in my seat, and like I actually felt what it felt like to have traction. Went through the gears and went to the top end of the track, and it went 850 at like 160. It was short-lived because it had cracked part of the transmission. Not that I had welded, but a weak link that I didn't see. We weren't able to make another pass after that, but gave me like just all the hope and the hours that I had put in making this thing work. And it's like, man, there may be something to this. Went back to the shop, fixed it, welded it up, strengthened it. Didn't really go back to the track, but then I went to race some of the top end stuff, the no prep stuff, and actually did good, won some races. And what some people don't know is like there's big money at these no prep races. Like that's what drew everybody, was the jackpots. I mean, like $5,000, $10,000 jackpots. As much as people say money doesn't buy you happiness, it sure does help, and it helps pay for these things because these things are not cheap. I made it to the finals in a $10,000 race. People are like winner take all, whatever. We decided to split it. It was 60-40, 6,000, 4,000. And I ended up losing. I broke an axle, broke the stock axle at the time, broke an axle, but still went home with like 4,000 bucks. Like that's huge, that's big money. So I knew it was time. It's like, man, the car's all-wheel drive. You know, it's something that I made together, and it's like, I need to make a bell housing. So started looking into that. I need to reverse engineer it. I actually made it, but now I need to make it out of like a billet aluminum. So I found a company out of Austin. I presented him my product and said, hey, this is what I made. I need you to make a design. So he said, okay. And we may need to make some revisions. So I ended up making a complete another one. That way we could mock up and scan and do all the 3D printing. I had my buddy Brian actually 3D print one. I have one that's in plastic over here in the shop, and 3D printed it just to see if, you know, things are kind of close. And so sure enough, he printed it for me. I actually mocked it up, put a gear set. It was buildable enough. And I was like, I think we're kind of close. We did some measurements, and so we sent it. I mean, we did, you know, I made my first one-off one, and I'll never forget when it came in, you know, FedEx, and I opened it, you know, because it came from the company who made it, and it was like a kid in a candy store. Like this was, you know, one big chunk 6061 billet aluminum. It was the most beautiful thing I ever seen at the time. I couldn't stop smiling. I think I had a grin ear to ear, and I looked at this bell housing like any which way possible, and it looked beautiful to me. And I could care less how it looked. I wanted to put it in the car and test it and work. And it did. It worked well enough to where it was in the car for quite some time. Yeah, there's revisions. You know, I made some revisions after that and made two, three revisions, and to where we have the finished product. I spent so much money making just one. Why am I gonna make one when there's other people that have H series or H22s? Like anybody who has that type of motor, they can use my bell housing. So I'm like, if I have this much money invested, might as well mass produce it and make it so everybody can use it. So I was like, yeah, so I mean, I'm gonna make this bell housing and produce it, and other people can have an all-wheel drive H series. I mean, why not? if you already have an H22 car, you can buy my bell housing, put your whether stock gear set, aftermarket gear set, whatever, it uses everything H component, and you can bolt it into your car, slap a K-Series transfer case in, and you have an all-wheel drive H22. It's like, oh man, this is what we've been missing the whole time. Like, you let your foot off the clutch, the car actually leaves, and it was like the best of both worlds. Our cars, they've always made the horsepower, they've always back half, they've always mile per hour, they could just never short track. And that was the last piece of the puzzle, was actually putting the power down. And so far, I mean, we haven't found the limit yet. I mean, the cars keep on going faster and faster and faster. You know, we just set a record with the race car here recently. It went 751, 189. It's been best of 192. I was actually getting ready to go to Las Vegas. I got a Facebook message from a buddy, Jared Holt, J-Rod, and he had two quick questions on his text. Can you drive your car on the street? And are you willing to be on TV? I said yes and yes. He said, give me a call. Called him, and he's like, let me tell you what I got going on. I said, what you got? Sean and the guys over there, 405 guys, they're filming a show, like a throwback show. They built some street cars. They want to go play on the street. They asked me to put a team together that was primarily imports or all imports. And he goes, I know you've done some no prep stuff. I know you're a diehard racer. You know, you've been around a while. Are you willing to be on my team? I said, man, absolutely. I said, what can you tell me? He's like, man, all I know is that we're filming in 3 weeks. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, 3 weeks. So from the moment I got this phone call to the moment we filmed our show was 3 weeks. That's like no time. He asked me, is your car running? I said, yeah, the car's just sitting in the shop. I was packing my bags to go to Vegas, and my mind was like gone. Vegas like went out the window. I was there physically, but my mind was, oh my gosh, I have to get the car ready. So when I came back from Vegas 4 days later, I had some tires showing up, some wheels. I was trying to figure out what offset. I never had a set of street wheels on that car. What I did know is that I could only run one. I couldn't run slicks. They're not dumb. They know how fast the car is on slicks. So to equal the playing field, since it's all-wheel drive, they said I had to run on street tires or a drag radial, and the only drag radial that I could run was a Mickey Thompson Street ET Street SS. And I couldn't find that tire size, the tire size that I wanted. What I got a hold of were some Toyo R888s. That's what I ran the show on. I ran Toyo R888s on the first time around, in the middle of the season. We ran the Toyo R888s, came back for the season finale. I was able to run the Toyo RRs. The car did well. For those of you who don't know, we won the season finale. We won the whole show. I was the only car to go undefeated. I went 7-0 on the entire season, which was really cool. Going on the show, there was one goal. My always goal is to win first round. And the biggest goal was to finally put on a good showing for imports. Not plenty, but there's been a handful of imports on TV. And whether they break, whether they talk a lot, whatever, no import has just gone out there and just let the car do the talking. And that's what I want to do. I'm a pretty quiet person. I don't brag. I don't say things. I always joke about, like, I like to hide behind the helmet, and I just do what I do. I race my race. Win or lose, I just wanted to show that these cars built right can be competitive, they can be consistent, and they can be fast. And I felt that I had a car that could do all of those things. And so we went out there and we started filming, and we did good. I won first couple of races on the first show, and the producers, you know, the 405 guys, they knew my car was fast. Was it the fastest there? Probably not. It was quick, it was competitive, but they knew what the car ran on the track. They knew, because my car, like, you know, I post my time slips, like, there's no secret what the car runs. They couldn't get the fact of how fast the car was on the track, and they thought they would run that on the street. And there's no way, the car was nowhere near that fast on the street. And to get the traction on the street, like, I put weight in the car, I want to say like almost 3,000 pounds. It was like 2970 something. It was heavy. I put like 300 pounds of weight in it. I put my weight bar back on the front, I put ballast in the back, had all the interior, had passenger seat, had a back seat. It was heavy. I put my doors back on it, the steel doors, the windows worked. It did everything the show required. It was as street as street could get. I drove on the street with them and made the cruise. I think maybe the only one that had 3 people in the car. driving on the streets in Oklahoma, I didn't turn the GoPro on. I didn't know if I was supposed to, but when we were filming, nobody turned the GoPro on inside the car for the production company. So on the show, there was never any inside shots, but it was me, Philip, and Rosie in the back seat. And we were cruising, 3 people in the car, just enjoying it. It drove the streets, no problem. And so, you know, we go round after round. We win 5 rounds, we win. It was $16,000. It's pretty awesome. It's the most money I've won with that car. I ran Murder Nova first round, a little OJ F-150 second round, farm truck in the Jeep third round. I ran Damon semifinals, and I ran Doc in the finals. None of them were ducks. Every car there was fast. I raced every race. No round was given to me.
Popping and banging, and ain't nobody else out here laughing because you beat me, or because I got beat by a Honda. You know, that don't happen out here. Toughest decision I've ever made in my life. That is the toughest decision I've ever had to make in my life.
I just won Street Wars, just won $16,000, biggest race I've ever been in.
I think I said it on TV. I said biggest race I've ever been, biggest stage I've ever been on. I just focused on my race. You know, you got cameras all around you, and like I've told people before, you got to race your race. I mean, I was able to, man, I've had this car 20 years. I mean, that was a year, 2 years ago, year and a half ago, 18 years. Like, I'm pretty comfortable in the seat. I'm really comfortable. I have a lot of seat time in that car. I call it my happy place. I call it my office. I think Philip had told me afterwards that I think Daddy Dave slung an alternator belt. We did a burnout. I did a burnout. He goes up there, and I think I had already raced Chuck or whatever. And so I was sitting there just in the car, just chilling. And I think it was Sean went up to Phil, and he's like, hey man, he's like, is Aaron nervous? Like, you think he's nervous? And he just like chuckled. He's like, no, he's not nervous. He's in his happy place. Like, he'll sit there all day long. Like, you're not going to get in his head. Like, that's what he does. And so, and it's true. Like, man, I get in the zone. I have my method to my madness. I like to sit in my car for quite some time before I make a pass. I don't like to be rushed. I like to take my time. If you ever pay attention to me in the staging lanes, I'll usually be one of the first ones in my car. It's scalding hot outside. I'm in Texas. I will sit in there because I got to get my mind right. And I remember Farm Truck saying to us, and I don't know if it was on camera or not, he was saying that, you know, the reason why they do so good on the show compared to the visitors that come in is because they're so comfortable with the cameras. They're used to the cameras being around. That's just what they do. So they don't choke, they don't do things, they don't make mistakes like other people do when they come into the show. And so that was a huge thing. I mean, like, you need to go up there and you need to perform your best. I mean, it's the biggest stage that I've ever been on. And people make mistakes, you know, whether you miss a gear, whether you go red, whether something, whatever, we're human. Mistakes happen. You know, so not only am I an underdog on an import, the car needs to not break. I can't make any mistakes. It's drag racing. Anything can happen. You know, I've told people before, just because the car's faster doesn't mean they're going to win. Like, you have to do your job. You know, to go out there and just go round after round and not make a mistake and just the car do what it was supposed to do and just fast enough was awesome. Just a great experience that we had on the show. There was a certain gentleman there that kind of told me, he says, hey, he kind of pulled me aside before we started filming the season finale, and he's like, hey Aaron, just want to let you know, he's like, I feel that your car doesn't fit the direction of the show. And I said, okay, well, why is that? He's like, well, you know, your car's got all these stickers and decals, and it's got this wide front end, and it's got, exhaust comes out the hood. And I said, you realize that if you take all the decals off the car, if you take the front end off the car, I said, the car will run the same. Like, there's no performance advantage. He's like, I know. He's like, but if you just look at our cars, you just see how they look like just normal street cars. I was like, okay, I understand. He's like, hey man, he's like, but you're here, you got invited back, you deserve to be here, let's have a good time, let's race. All right, cool. So I already kind of knew that it was gonna be difficult to get the car back on the show, if we had the opportunity. I was like, well, it'd probably be easier to build another car. It's not easier, okay? But I just didn't want to be switching the car back and forth, like street trim, like TV show to race trim. Like, it's a lot of work. Like, it's not unbolt and do that. It's like actually modifying some stuff. So I started seeking out some sponsors, or all my sponsors. We went to PRI and kind of sealed the deal on a lot of stuff. I mean, we were able to show them what we did on the show. My buddy Magic Films, he put me together like a little video, man, and everybody jumped on board. So when I built the car, I was looking at it, and of course I like building everything, right? And so the Prelude, the rear suspension is totally different than any other like Civic and Integra suspension. And I was gonna build my own all-wheel drive kit, and after looking at it, and I was talking about the time crunch, there's no way I was gonna be able to design a whole a whole all-wheel drive setup for the Prelude in the back. And at the time, a company by the name of S1 was making something a little bit before that, and I saw it. They made a complete bolt-in kit, and so fortunately I hit them up. They jumped on board as sponsors kind of with the car to be part of the car, and man, I ordered their kit and everything bolted up. I mean, so remember, our timeline was very, very small. So I ordered the S1 kit for the 5th Gen Prelude and bolted it up, and man, that made my job much easier. So that kit was bolted up fantastic. It's flawless, beautiful kit. Thank you to them. That made this process so much easier. So that's how the Prelude came about. I mean, initially it was for the TV show. The race car, that thing's like, we always joke about, it's like a full-time job. The faster it goes, the more you work on it, the less you race it, the less time you're in the seat. It's crazy. It makes no sense. So that car only goes out a couple of times a year, a few times a year. I've pulled back and not raced as much and focused on some other stuff in business and shop and other stuff like that. So it was just another reason to build the Prelude, the street car. I mean, I never really had a fast street car. I don't street race. That's not me. But I never really had a car to cruise around. I was like, man, that's gonna be a perfect car that I don't want to work on it as much. It's not going to make the same power as the race car. It runs on, pumpy 85. It's got full exhaust, power windows, power steering, power door locks, keyless entry, everything but air conditioning. We did it also for some dragon drives. That was kind of a cool thing that's going on. I'd still like to do some more of them. I've done 3 of them so far. They're all been king of the open road dragon drives, and it's been a blast. This car has over 600 miles on it. And crazy enough, that's what we were worried about the most, was like, man, is it going to do the drives? And the car did the drives, no problem. Then it threw fits trying to go down the track. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I can get a car to go down the track, but when it built this car, the car wouldn't go down the track. But it did the drives no problem. So we would do 200+ mile drive, go to the track, and then we had a transmission failure, and then we had some boost leaks, and we had all kinds of little things, new car gremlins. Keep in mind, I hadn't built a new car in like 18 years. At this time, there'd never been an 8-second full chassis like street Prelude. So the goal was to be the first 8-second Prelude. There were some other guys that were really close. Mario, I think he went like 3 or 4 9.0s in Colorado. Kevin Tweedy's in there as well. He's trying to run an 8. There's a handful of guys that they're front wheel drive, they were trying to run an 8. And as time went on, I was like, man, maybe I should try to be the first 8-second car. Had some other stuff going on, just kind of let it sit in the back burner. Built the shop and just kind of let it sit there. And being that it was all-wheel drive, I was like, well, it'd be really cool. First all-wheel drive Prelude that's running, the first all-wheel drive Prelude that's running, and the first Prelude in the 8s. And so this year we had IFO Ennis, which was in March, some first week of March, somewhere there, just before 2K. That's when we took the car out, ran that 910. So that was middle to end of March. The closest track to me is Texas Motorplex in Ennis. I was able to get in a track rental group on social media. We had some bad weather right before that. The weather was kind of lingering from the week before. Weather cleared out perfectly. The conditions came around. It was like mid-70s, which was nice. So went up to Ennis, went out at first pass, and of course, race cars do race car things, and it kind of had some gremlins and it fought me. And on the first pass, I had a little issue, 60 fitted well, had a little issue, injector clip popped off. That was completely my fault. Had to abort the run on that one. Second run comes up, wastegate line had melted off because of the way I had routed it. So that was second pass. And I'm like, man, I just need to put all the passes together. We had done some changes on the tune-up, and I had joked around. I was like, man, third time's a charm. Like the third pass, like this is gonna be it. And so sure enough, the car goes 145, 60 foot. I grab second, and the car's there, grab third, grab fourth. I mean, it felt fast, you know, it was smooth, uneventful, and I knew it was gonna be a good pass, and I didn't know, I was hoping it was gonna be an 8-second pass, and so, you know, drove the car back and drove up to the ET stand, grabbed the time slip and saw the time, and as you can see, I kind of didn't believe it and kind of chuckled and was like, man, like 899, like, would have been sufficient. Me and Jason had been talking, if everything went right, we kind of knew the car would run an 860. And so for the very first clean pass that night, it went 861, 174. And I was like, man, that was like, I mean, that's pretty deep into the eights. That's like a mid 8-second pass, and super excited. So man, drove back to the pits. Jason's like, we're just all excited. It's like, man, we're done. Like that is it. Like the car runs. Like that was huge. I mean, that's set the bar pretty high on the record, you know. And man, I drove back home no problem. Got home at like 3:30 in the morning, just still high on life, the adrenaline. I guess that's the passion. That's why we do this. I mean, it makes us do some crazy decisions. So I've said it for years. Some of my close friends know my motto is never build a car on credit. That's the worst thing you can do. This is 20 years. This car's been built 20 years. So, you know, I've done this for a long time, you know, kind of as a hobby, kind of turned it into business. It's kind of borderline right now. It's a lot of fun if you do it at your comfort level. Yeah, another little thing I believe in or live by is race your race. You know, you have to do your job, you know, in the seat as a driver and focus on what you're gonna do. They're gonna do what they're gonna do. You have no control of what goes on over there. So race your race, get comfortable. You know, a good buddy of mine, Magic, back in the day, you know, I would travel all over the place, and he was like, man, like, why do you go, like, there's so many cars that are faster? And it's like, I race my race. Like, there's plenty of faster cars, but there's more than one way to win a race. Reaction time, you cut a light. I've won so many races on cutting a light. I've not always had the fastest car. Yeah, I've been number one qualifier plenty of times. Don't worry about anything else. Take the time, focus, whether you need to sit in your car, pray, whatever you have to do, just get comfortable and just do you. Be safe, you know, don't rush, get that seat time and race your race. So that's my story. If you made it to the end, I think it was pretty long, a little bit about me. Appreciate it. Thank y'all for everything. Yeah, good luck. Hope to see you out there.